I want to tell you about a case that came up in a discussion I had with a colleague a few years ago. A woman had passed away at home alone. Her 2 dogs were in the house with her. And when she was found 3 days later, the dogs had begun consuming her remains. Now, before you click off, before you go, oh, that's disgusting, I don't want to hear this, I want you to stay. Because the reason that happened isn't what you think. And understanding it changes everything about how you see your dog, and it will help you have a happier, better behaved dog. So let's get into it. And the honest answer to the question of whether your dog would eat you is, it depends. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but it genuinely does depend on a number of factors. And I'm going to walk you through each of them, because when we understand the why behind each one, you start to understand your dog at a biological and behavioral level that most owners never come close to reaching. The first thing that we need to establish is that this is documented. This isn't just internet myth. There are forensic science studies, real peer-reviewed research that have looked at cases where dogs have been found with deceased owners, and the findings are consistent enough to draw some solid conclusions. One study found cases where consumption began within 24 hours. 24 hours. Now, I know that will shock some of you. Others found it was several days. The variance is massive, and the reason for that variance are exactly what we want to try and unpick. Now, the first factor, and this one surprises people the most, is that it has very little to do with hunger. The assumption is always, well, the dog was starving and it had no choice. And in my experience, that is the comfortable lie people tell themselves, because the uncomfortable truth is that consumption has been recorded in cases where there was food available in the home, dry kibble in a bowl, and the dog still turned to the body. So we have to let go of that idea that this is purely a survival-driven last resort behavior driven by starvation. It's not always that. And as a canine behaviorist, that lands very differently to me. Dogs are extraordinarily sensitive to changes in the environment. When an owner dies, particularly suddenly, the dog doesn't understand death in the way that we do. What it understands is that something is catastrophically wrong. The social structure has collapsed. The person who was the center of its world is lying completely still, not responding, and the dog is in a state of often acute panic. There's evidence to suggest that some consumption begins around the face and hands, the areas most associated with interaction, with breath, with communication. The dog is, in some sense, trying to rouse the owner, trying to interact, and then something shifts. Researchers believe the stress response, combined with the biological cues from decomposition beginning, can trigger something that sits at a very deep instinctual level. Think about Sully for a moment, my mate Uncle Sully, my working line Labrador, incredibly biddable, incredibly bonded to me. I look at him sometimes and I think, there is a domestic pet in front of me, yes, but there is also an animal, a predator with thousands of years of evolutionary wiring underneath that beautiful golden coat. And that wiring doesn't disappear because we've brought dogs inside and given them memory foam beds. It's still there. It will always be there. That's not something to fear. It's something to beautifully respect. The second factor is breed, and specifically what that breed was originally designed to do. Now, I'm going to be careful here because I'm not saying any breed is more dangerous than another in the context of living with one, but the research does suggest that breed can influence timing and behavior. Dogs with higher prey drive, higher environmental awareness, higher arousal thresholds, they may respond to these biological stress cues more quickly. I look at young Reginald, my German Shepherd, and Reggie's got a kind soul, he genuinely has. He's one of the most soft-natured dogs I've ever worked with, but he is also a dog with enormous drive and biological responsiveness. The two things can coexist. That's what makes dogs dogs. Now, the third factor we have to consider is the relationship and the routine. This one is where it gets genuinely interesting from a behavioral standpoint. Dogs that are highly, deeply bonded to a single owner, and I mean dogs where the owner is everything, the whole world, every walk, every meal, every moment of contact, those dogs actually appear in some cases to show prolonged attachment behavior before any consumption begins. They stay close, they wait. The bond itself seems to delay the biological shift. Now compare that to a dog in a household where the relationship is more transactional. Fed, walked, not much else. And that shift can happen faster, which tells you something remarkable. The quality of your relationship with your dog is written into how they respond to your absence at the most fundamental level possible. I personally think that's quite profound. Now, I want to address something directly because every time this topic comes up online, someone says it in the comments, and let's head it off. This does not mean your dog doesn't love you. That framing completely understands what dogs are. Your dog is not a human with fur. Love for a dog is not the same cognitive and emotional construct that it is for us. Your dog operates in the world through instinct, through drives, through the present moment. It is not capable of sitting with grief in the same way that you or I would sit with grief. What it experiences is disruption, panic, confusion, and ultimately biological imperatives taking over. That isn't a betrayal, that is an animal being an animal. And if anything, understanding that should make you more compassionate towards what your dog actually is rather than the anthropomorphized version that we often project onto them. The practical takeaway from all of this, and there always should be one, because information without application is just entertainment, and we always want to make sure that you leave with value, is to make a plan. If you live alone with a dog, have someone who regularly checks in on you, not weekly, regularly. Tell someone you have a dog, have a plan for what happens to your dog if something happens to you. This is just responsible ownership. It's not nice to talk about, but it's the reality. And honestly, it's the kind of conversation that the dog community doesn't have nearly enough because we're all too busy arguing about harnesses or raw feeding. The harsh reality is that we share our homes with animals. Wonderful, complex, loving in their way, but instinct-driven animals. And they deserve an owner who sees them clearly, not just on the good days with the nice walks and the Instagram pictures, but in the full, biological, sometimes confronting truth of what they are. Now, if you want to go deeper on understanding dog behavior at the real level, the science, the instinct, the welfare, I've got a completely free course linked below. Thousands of people have been through it, and the feedback is that it is genuinely brilliant. I'm incredibly proud of it. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do. We make videos like this every week to try and help you become better canine leaders that can have better behaved canine companions. So I can't wait to see you in the next one.